My name is Sherry. I still vividly remember the day of the will reading. The conference room was filled with an air of tension, and the mahogany table seemed to bear the weight of our family's secrets. My brother, Derek, sat across from me, his face a mask of confidence, while his wife, Tiffany, tapped her manicured nails impatiently. As the lawyer, M.S. Thompson, began to read my father's will, Derek's satisfaction was palpable. He had always been the favored son in our family, and he expected to inherit everything. My father, Henry, was a successful businessman who believed that sons were the ones to carry on the family legacy. He had built his life around this unshakable belief, and he had made sure that Derek received every advantage. When I wanted to pursue a career in medicine, my father scoffed at the idea. "Girls don't need such high-flying careers," he'd said. "You'll get married and have a family." But I was determined. I worked hard, got scholarships, and put myself through medical school. My mother, Grace, was the gentle soul of our family. She had a rose garden in the backyard that she tended every morning. She always tried to smooth over my father's harsh words, but I could see the pain in her eyes when she saw how he treated me. 2 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. It was a devastating blow. I immediately took a leave from my job at the local hospital to take care of her. I was by her side through every chemotherapy session, every moment of pain. Derek, on the other hand, visited her only a few times. Each visit was brief, and he always seemed more concerned about his business deals than about our mother. Tiffany, Derek's wife, was a socialite who spent her days attending parties and posting pictures of her designer clothes on social media. She looked down on me, as if I was nothing more than a servant. One Thanksgiving, she said to me, "Sherry, don't you think you should do something more glamorous? You can't just be a doctor forever." My mother's hand tightened on her fork, but I just smiled and said, "I'm helping people, and that's what matters." 6 weeks ago, my mother was declared cancer-free. We were overjoyed. We went out to her favorite restaurant to celebrate, and she ordered a glass of champagne for the first time in years. She said she wanted to visit her mother, my grandmother, Rose, who lived in a retirement home. 4 weeks ago, my parents went to visit my grandmother. They never came back. A drunk driver hit their car on the highway. The police said it was instant, that they didn't suffer. But I'll never know for sure. I was on a night shift at the hospital when I got the call. I remember collapsing in the stairwell, unable to breathe. The funeral was a somber affair. Derek gave the eulogy, talking mostly about our father's business achievements and barely mentioning our mother. After the reception, as I was still in a daze, Derek pulled me aside. "We need to talk about the house," he said. "Dad always said the house would go to me. You need to clear out your things by the end of the week." I was shocked. "Derek, we haven't even read the will yet," I said. But he just shrugged and said, "The will is just a formality." You know how Dad felt. 2 days later, when I came home from work, I found that the locks had been changed. My things were thrown out in the garage, and some of them were soaked from the rain. I called Derek, and he said coldly, "The house is legally mine. You have 24 hours to get your stuff off the property." I was heartbroken. I sat on the wet grass, holding my mother's old locket that she had given me. That's when I found a letter in a box of my mother's things. It was addressed to me. "My darling Sherry, if you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. Your father and your brother have shown you their true colors. I've seen it all these years, and I've tried to protect you. I've been working with M.S. Thompson for 8 years to make sure you're taken care of. She has all the papers and arrangements. You are not a burden. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you more than anything, Mom." I was in disbelief. I called M.S. Thompson right away. She told me to trust her and wait for the will reading. 3 days before the will reading, Derek called me. He sounded friendly, but I knew it was just an act. "Sherry, I've been thinking. This situation isn't good for anyone. I've drawn up an agreement. If you sign away any claim to the estate, I'll give you $10,000 in cash. It's enough to get you settled somewhere nice." I was furious. "Derek, I took care of Mom for 2 years while you barely visited. You can't just buy me off." He got angry and said, "You're making a mistake. You won't get anything in probate. Dad's will is clear. I hung up on him. Finally, the day of the will reading arrived. When Ms. Thompson announced that we would be reading 2 wills, Derek and Tiffany were confused. They thought everything was jointly owned by my parents. My father's will was exactly as Derek expected. He left 70% of his personal assets to Derek, and I was left with 30% of the remaining assets, which, after debts and expenses, would be almost nothing. But then, Ms. Thompson opened my mother's will. Derek scoffed and said, "Mom was just a housewife. She didn't have her own estate." But Ms. Thompson calmly explained that 5 years ago, my parents had executed a deed transfer. The family house was transferred to my mother's sole name to protect it from a potential lawsuit my father was facing at the time. The house, currently valued at approximately $600,000, belonged solely to my mother, and she had left it to me. Derek was in shock. He couldn't believe it. "This has to be a mistake. Dad would never agree to this," he said. But my grandmother, Rose, who was also at the will reading, said sharply, "Grace told your father it was temporary. He never checked." Ms. Thompson then revealed that 8 years ago, my mother had established an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. The trust was funded with a $300,000 gift from my grandmother. My mother had invested it conservatively over the years, and the current value was approximately $1 million. Derek was beside himself. "This is fraud. Dad didn't know about this," he sputtered. But Ms. Thompson explained that the trust was legally established with funds that were never my father's, and he had no claim to it. To make matters worse, my mother had also taken out a life insurance policy with me as the sole beneficiary. The policy was worth $400,000. Derek stood up, his face red with anger. "I'm contesting all of this. Mom wasn't in her right mind when she made these decisions," he shouted. But Ms. Thompson showed him the evaluation from a board-certified psychiatrist that confirmed my mother's full cognitive capacity at the time of signing. She also had video documentation of my mother explaining every decision in the will. Tiffany broke down. "This is insane. She's just a doctor, and she gets all this money," she cried. My grandmother then revealed that she knew about Derek's failed business investments and that he was on the verge of losing his house. My mother had known about it too, and that's why she had made sure I was protected. I looked at Derek and said, "You've always thought you were entitled to everything just because you're a man. But you've never really earned anything. You visited Mom only a few times when she was sick, and you treated me like a burden." Derek's face fell. He tried to say something, but he couldn't. Then he suddenly fainted. The paramedics were called, and they said it was just a syncope due to shock. After the will reading, my grandmother gave me a beautiful diamond ring that had been in our family for generations. She said my mother had asked her to give it to me. She also told me that my mother had wanted to leave my father years ago, but she had stayed for me and Derek. 1 month later, I met with a financial advisor. She recommended that I keep the trust invested and use the money from the insurance for emergencies. She also advised me to pay off my student loans, which I did right away. I decided to keep my job at the hospital. I love helping people, and I didn't want money to change who I am. I rented out the family house to a young couple with a child. The child was so excited to play in the rose garden. 3 months after the will reading, I heard that Derek had to sell his house, and Tiffany had filed for divorce. I don't wish him harm, but I also know that he needs to learn from his mistakes. 6 months later, I enrolled in a medical research program. It's something I've always wanted to do, but I could never afford it before. Now, with the financial support, I can pursue my dreams. I've learned that sometimes the people who love us protect us in ways we don't see. My mother's love and planning have given me the opportunity to live the life I've always wanted. And I'll always remember the lessons she taught me about standing up for myself and not letting others define my worth.